Welcome back to the AgriSpec Tom channel. We're now in the third week of March of 2025 and it's looking very, very different to how it was in 2024. The weather conditions are much more with us this year and the ground is working beautifully. We've had a little bit of rain, which isn't a bad thing compared to last year when it was continual rain and continual bad weather. This year, a little bit of rain has not been a bad thing. There's been urea that's been sitting on the ground now for a few days, leading into 10 days in some cases, where a little bit of rain is going to just soak on that urea and is going to put that down into the ground, into the root zone where it's needed. And plenty of the spring cereals are now in the ground or are getting into that final stages where they're being drilled. So everything is going very well. And winter crops that have come through the 2024 autumn into 2025 are looking excellent. But we now need to turn our head a little bit forward into some key elements that are going to affect our soils and our crops moving into the season. And that's what I want to touch on today. Behind me is a field which is going into spring barley this year. And it's a great example of a field that was absolutely hammered by 2 years of heavy rainfall. And it's a field where one of the crops actually did fail. I believe it was a winter wheat that failed. So it's had to go through a fair bit of remedial work to get back to good health and be able to work well this season. And actually, there are a couple of things that we need to think about with this ground. It's had heavy rainfall over the past couple of years, and things like sulfur are going to be heavily depleted within the soil profile, because sulfur, like nitrogen, is a highly mobile nutrient, and as such it will leach through the soil profile and be lost very, very quickly. And after 2 years of heavy rainfall, there is going to be very little, if anything, left in the soil. So sulfur is something that we need to think about this season on all our crops, because soils will be depleted in sulfur. A lack of available sulfur within your soil, which can be readily available for your crop, can have devastating effects on both the yield and quality of your crop. So it's a nutrient we can't afford to disregard as we're putting together our nutrition plans for the season. So if you haven't already accounted for your sulfur, it's important that you now consider that option. So it's perfectly normal to apply a top dress of ammonium nitrate for any of your crops which are growing through the year, but it could be worth considering applying some ammonium sulfate as well, because that will give not just your nitrogen demands but also your sulfur demands, which means that you can apply both in one go. Another thing to think about if you need to apply some potash through the season is you could also use polysulfate, which gives your sulfur needs but also some potash as well as some magnesium as well, and also some calcium too. So those are some options that you could potentially look at to meet your sulfur demands, only if your crop needs it. But if you've already accounted for your sulfur demands, you don't really need to think about this. But there are plenty of people who don't really think too much about their sulfur, and this is something which is an important nutrient to get right. Zinc is another nutrient which is often overlooked as a deficiency, and is most commonly deficient in soils which have a high organic matter content, as well as those which have a high pH. Now, the way you can get around this is either to apply zinc as part of a starter fertilizer program, so that's very common with maize and things like oilseed rape, as well as doing or applying zinc as part of a foliar application program. But it's one that is very important that you don't overlook, and as I said, it's most common in places where there's a high organic matter content. So for instance, if you've applied a lot of muck over the history of that field, it will be common there, and also areas where there's high pH, so places which have particularly stony soil, limestone soils, those sort of things, chalky soils will have that sort of deficiency on them. So that's an important one to look out for. Now, thinking more specifically about maize, because we are not too far off the season where we're going to start thinking about drilling maize. When we get into April, there are going to be plenty of people, especially by the looks of the way that this year is lining up, are going to look at getting maize in as early as possible. But there are a couple of things that we really need to think about when we're thinking about maize and establishing it well. And one of them is making sure that it has the correct nutrition. Now, plenty of farmers have already applied their slurry, they've applied their farmyard manures, that's in the ground is kind of ready to go, and when soil temperatures are right, the maize running is going to start. Hopefully in April. If you're going before April, please don't, because there'll be a lot of problems establishing that maize, and having a final cold snap at the end of March and into April will absolutely devastate your crop. You really must not do that if you want to get your maize up and away well. So make sure the soil temperature is at the right stage for your soil type. So remember, that is 8 degrees for 4 consecutive days on light soils, and on heavy soils 12 degrees for 4 consecutive days before you should start drilling. And that is something that you should stick to get the best out of your crop. But coming back to the thing about nutrition. So maize is a lazy rooting plant, and in order for it to establish well, it really needs to put down roots properly, and that energy transfer is very important. So applying a starter fertilizer, something like DAP, which is diammonium phosphate, will help do that, because it will put a starter fertilizer in the root zone of that seed, and it will ensure that the roots start to push down and then find that available phosphate within the soil profile. Remember, phosphate is an immobile nutrient. When it is lost into the environment, it is connecting to soil particles. It's not like nitrogen, which will leach freely through the soil profile. It has to attach to a soil particle. So maize roots will need to search for those available nutrients, and they'll need to put down the roots in order to do that. So giving them a good head start is a great way of doing that. The best thing to do is to consult your FACTS qualified advisor, so your agronomist potentially, to talk about this, because it will be dependent on the soil indices that you have and the type of land that you have, of whether that is an appropriate course of action for you. Let's hope me saying that this season has kicked off very well does not jinx it. I'm really hoping it doesn't, because we could really use some good news in the agricultural community right now, and having a good year with good harvests and great healthy crops would really do a power of good right now for the industry. So let's hope this season is an absolute banger, and I hope all of you are able to get into your fields this year and have done all the work that you need to do, and you're not feeling like you're too far behind, as inevitably plenty always do. But until next time, I hope you're doing well. If you've got anything you'd like to leave in the comment section about this video, and if you'd like to like and subscribe and share this with your friends, I would be immensely grateful. And if you'd like to follow me on my other social media, go into my description and have a little look there. But until next time, guys, I'll see you anon.